I thought it was either I go on to the bitter end, or I can't keep going on again, head in hand. I can't do this for another 25 years. I didn't know that there was a door number 3 because I was scared. And part of that was, Jordan, is because I was scared to talk about it because there's such a stigma around alcohol and substance use disorder. Again, 12 to 15% of our colleagues at some point are going to meet criteria for this. We feel like we can't ask for help because we feel like we're going to be punished instead of being helped.
That is Dr. Phil Richmond, a veterinarian with a passion for supporting colleagues through recovery and well-being efforts. And this is the VIN Foundation's Veterinary Pulse podcast. I'm Jordan Ben-Shia, VIN Foundation's Executive Director. Join me as we talk with veterinary colleagues about critical topics and share stories that connect us as humans, as animals, as a veterinary community. This podcast is made possible by individuals like you who donate to the VIN Foundation. Thank you. Please check the episode notes for bios, links, and information mentioned. Hey y'all, a quick heads up that some of the content in today's episode may include triggers as it relates to alcohol and substance abuse disorder, childhood trauma, and suicidal ideations. As a reminder, the VIN Foundation's confidential support program, Vets for Vets, is here for you, and you can find more information to reach out in the episode notes. Please know you are not alone. Welcome, Phil. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate you having me today.
We have been, Phil's been an active person within the VIN Foundation for a while, and we've been chatting about a variety of things over the years. And it just seemed, as I usually tend to, beg people to come on the podcast and share their story. And so I thought, come on, Phil, this would be a great story to share. And I'd love to share your story. And I think our audience and colleagues would be really interested and love to, learn more about your story. So let's start with your journey. What was your journey like to veterinary medicine? Was there an aha moment, or how did you know that this was the profession for you?
Right. So I had a circuitous route to
I love it. Okay.
Medicine.
Those are the best.
So yes. And I promise everyone this will all tie together. So I grew up in a small town called Castleberry, Florida. And so about the age of 8, my dad had a massive heart attack. And so why that's important, 2 things. One is that we're going to talk a little bit as we go on about childhood trauma and how that affects our brains, how that affects, the risks that we have, the risk factors that we have for certain conditions as we get older. The other thing is that it greatly affected my father's, ability to make money, to work. So, from about the age of 8 on, we struggled quite a bit financially. And so my mom, though, was a dog groomer, and she also worked for a couple of veterinary hospitals in the Orlando area as a receptionist. So we had, growing up, we had ducks, we had dogs, we had cats. So we had all kinds of animals, and I just, like many of us in veterinary medicine, very much going through some of the traumatic stuff. My dad was likely had bipolar disease, and and also was an alcoholic, and and he did the best that he could with the tools that he had, but that did cause a lot of more trauma as well. Why I'm saying that is that animals early on were one of those things that allowed me to find some solace, as I just remember sitting with my dogs and just, petting them and just really connecting with animals on a real spiritual level, even as a youngster. So progress forward, going on through high school, up through college. So part of my journey is that to be a veterinarian, we have to be somewhat adept at sciences. We have to be pretty decent students. And so what was interesting is I was a good student. However, my coping mechanism from the time that I was about 15 was alcohol. So, any stressors, anxieties, anything along that nature, really was, I used alcohol to treat that. I just really sought out the times to drink, because what I found out later is that it did something for me that I thought that it did for everyone, which it just that that screw right in my chest, that anxiety that, I don't fit in, that I don't belong, I'm not good enough, a couple drinks in and it would just unravel that, and it would make me feel like I was a part of. And I, at that age to have that tool was very powerful. And so that was the thing that I had in my back pocket, all through high school, all through undergrad. And so what happened? So I went to University of Florida. I had a scholarship. Went to University of Florida my freshman year, and I thought I could just show up for the tests, kind of like I did in high school, and still get A's. And it doesn't work that
Same.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So I got in a fraternity. It was like next level drinking. As an 18-year-old without responsibilities. And so I lost my scholarship. And so I ended up having to come back home. So came back home. Again, my parents, I'm grateful for how I was raised, but financially we didn't have the financial resources for me to, for them to pay for school. So they said, look, you're going to have to get a loan, get jobs and such. So I was doing personal training. I was doing all these. So I was working three jobs and going to community college, and I was going to class, which was, and then I was like, oh, what shocker. Like if you go to class and study, like they
right. Who knew?
tell you what's on. Yeah. It's who knew that was going to be, and did all the thing, got on whatever the president's list and all the wonderful accolades. And then at 20, my dad passed away. He had a massive stroke. I was a server at Olive Garden. I always remember that. And I got a call from my mom that he's in an ambulance and they're taking him to the hospital. So at 20, I'm right in this period of time where I'm starting to realize that my dad has always cared about me and has tried to help me, and some of the things, shockingly, some of the things that he's told me, oh my gosh, they were true. Is that
so
it was
frustrating.
Yeah, right. Amazing. And so that was challenging. So 20 years old, my mom, really took it hard. I mean, that my dad passed away. I mean, as she should. I mean, not.
Right.
But there was a rift that happened. Is that we both kind of separated for a little bit. And so what did I have to fall back on was drinking. And so I was pretty much drinking every night. And I ended up taking some time off of school, worked as a personal trainer for a while, and then just realized I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I took about a year and a half, 2 years off of school, and then went back to community college, took a course in psychology, because I thought maybe I had broken my brain, and ended up doing well and went forward. So, and then just realized, okay, just need to go to school, do this. And then I thought that I wanted to be an MD. And so I went home. I ended up going to University of South Florida, did really well. And I went home over break. And I was like, oh, I know a little bit more. Like now I've got, I'm leaning into biology and, chemistry and, and microbiology and these types of things. And so I went and worked for one of the vets that my mom had worked for. when I was growing up. And I went there over, it was like spring break or Thanksgiving break or something. I worked to make some extra money. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, cause
That was your aha
I had
moment.
wavered. Yeah. And I mean, I always
Mm-hmm.
loved animals and always, but and now what I will say is that part of that is that I knew that I was a drinker. Like I knew that I was, like, so I was, I knew what my personality was. And I
Mm-hmm.
also didn't know if I was going to be able to be, not to diminish what it means to be a veterinarian, but like I had this, like, I can't be this huffy, you know, physician, type. And now, by the way, knowing physicians, I know that's not, it's not true, not true at all. But that was this thing that I had in my head. So part of it
Mm-hmm.
but it was like I wanted to do everything. I loved
Right.
surgery, I loved cardiology, I loved ophthalmology. I just loved everything, and I realized that I would have to, if I sort of wanted to do that in human medicine, I had to be a trauma surgeon, is what I thought
Mm-hmm.
in my head. And I'm like, well, I don't know, that's sounds like a lot. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
ended up switching gears and leaned into started the pre-vet society back up at University of Florida, did all the things that, a lot of us that are A-type personalities do. So
I have
anyhow,
no
and
idea what you're
then,
talking about at
yeah,
all.
right,
None,
right.
none.
All
Yeah.
the, yeah, we talk in the uncharted community about red dots. It's like, tum, 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 and so I'm part of that. So that's when, I ended up going to University of Florida, and started in 2002. I graduated in '06, and the thing is again I did well in vet school, but
Mm-hmm.
I continued to drink, and I started having some consequences. And and I'll share this with everyone, is that, I 3 months before I graduated, I got a DUI on campus at University of Florida, and they were going to kick me out of school with 3 months left to graduate.
Oh,
And I had to
jeez.
go to my professors hat in hand, as though I was asking for a residency, and ask them
Right.
to write me letters of recommendation to keep me in school. I say that because it's the power of this disease of alcohol. Yeah, of
Mm-hmm.
alcohol use disorder. We don't really say alcoholism, so the term is alcohol use disorder or substance use
Mm-hmm.
disorder. Is that it's powerful enough that from the outside, someone would say, how could you ever pick up a drink again, knowing that those are the consequences? And that's actually one of the definitions of alcohol use disorders, in the face of growing consequences, that we continue to use or drink. And so I kept drinking, and because again, it was the only tool in the toolbox. So I get
Mm-hmm.
out, I'm in practice, and I don't drink for about 6 months. And 6 months in, it's just the rigors of being a new grad, and I'm working 80 hours a week. That was not my job that did that.
Mm-hmm.
My first boss was basically telling me to throttle down. He's like, this is before
Mm-hmm.
burnout was really, 15, 16 years ago. I mean, people knew about it. I don't want to say that, but
Right. Right.
he was like, I was coming in on my days off to do surgery. I was working at the emergency clinic. I was picking up shifts on my days off. And he's like, you got to slow down, And
Mm-hmm.
so what happened is that I just kept working and working and working. I didn't have any tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting on my couch, just exhale, and I had my head in my hands, and I'm like, I can't do this for 20, 30 more years. And
Mm-hmm.
I just started. And so I was in a really, really dark place. And again, only tool I have is booze and
Mm-hmm.
substances. And so
Right. And this
I
is six
got to
months out of
where
graduating, right?
so there's
Roughly.
a period. So it
Mm-hmm.
started about 6 months
Mm-hmm.
out, about a year of this,
Mm-hmm.
to where then I was suicidal. Um, you know, I was, it just every day was a struggle for me to just get through the day. And
Mm-hmm.
I was visually affected at work. because again, I had so much wrapped into me being a veterinarian was who I was as a person. And what's interesting is that they will tell you is that for medical professionals, if we see a change in a medical professional that is around alcohol or substance use, like we're really close to the end part of the disease, because that's the last thing to go. Is that relationships are affected.
Mm-hmm.
All the things are affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to pause here because sometimes when we hear this story, people will say, "Well, God, that's it." It pulls at my heartstrings, or it's just or questioning how could you get that far, or some of these questions that come up. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I want to bring up, and this is why I said with childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
is that when we talk about adverse childhood experiences, when we talk about the ACEs scores, so there's a list of 10 experiences, and you answer yes or no to these, along the lines of, before your 18th birthday, were you ever physically abused? Were you ever verbally abused? Were you
Mm-hmm.
sexually abused? Did you have a parent who had a mental illness? Did you have a parent who had an alcohol or substance use disorder? Did you see violence in your home? Did you sometimes not have enough to eat because of financial pressures or things like that? There's 10 of these questions. And if you answer yes to 4 or more of those, or four actually, you answer
Mm-hmm.
yes to 4, risk of alcohol use disorder is 7 times higher than someone who has 0. Substance use disorder, 7 to 10 times. ADHD, 7 times. Depression, 6 times. Anxiety, 7 times. All of these things happen, and when we see what happens physiologically to the human
Mm-hmm.
brain when we're children, when all that cortisol and the adrenaline or the epinephrine and all the stress hormones hit, the effect that it has on a developing brain is amazing. The reason why I say this is when we see people that are going through that, is perhaps we can begin to look at people through a different lens. And instead of
Mm-hmm.
asking, and Oprah recently released a book, Gabor Mate talks about this, is instead of saying, what's wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
is ask what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is to
Mm-hmm.
say that something beyond your control very likely played a part in making this happen. And I
Mm-hmm.
say that, and it's not by no means an excuse or anything of that nature, but if we think about as veterinary professionals, if we knew something was going to increase the risk of disease in our patients 7 to 10 times. And then, by the way, suicidal ideation, if I remember, the number is, I have to look it up, I have it in some of my talks, but I think you're 28 times more likely to attempt taking your own life. And suicidal ideation goes up. So it's part of this that we talk about suicidal ideation, we talk about the issues in veterinary medicine, and we're just now beginning to talk about this. Is that can we share this? And what I can tell you anecdotally, and we can kind of slide into some of the other things we were going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that probably 90 to 100%. So I've been in recovery for 15 years now, and I've been
Mm-hmm.
very grateful to work with a lot of medical professionals in early recovery. And I would tell
Mm-hmm.
you, without fail, every single one of those people had things that happened to them when they were children,
Right.
and every one of them had suicidal ideations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's saying, wow, like that's, and it doesn't, intelligence doesn't have an effect on this. There certainly are protective factors, but that gets into, we talk about mental illness, we talk about mental fitness and mental health, and we
Mm-hmm.
talk about the concern of suicide in the profession, but we don't talk about 12 to 15% of medical professionals at some point in their career are going to meet criteria for an alcohol or substance use disorder, because we don't ask for help and we tend to self-medicate. And the other thing is that 50 to 60% of people who choose to end their own life, there's alcohol or substances involved. Now, it doesn't always
Mm-hmm.
mean that they have a use disorder, but it's part of the it's a big risk factor for that. And so I hope, in the profession that we can look at this through a different lens, through a lens of caring, and again of what happened to you and how can we help,
Mm-hmm.
versus what's wrong with you, you're weak. Like why would you
Right.
do those things? Yeah. And that leads into some of our other topics of how yeah.
You did a great job there. You covered like six questions in one answer. I love
Yeah.
it.
There we go.
But but gosh, you touched on so much here, Phil, and I really appreciate your
Yeah.
just your courage and your willing to be vulnerable, because I think that's really how we can connect, and learn from each
Yeah.
other. And there's a quote, one of my favorite quotes, which has been attributed to Plato, but who really knows? Um, which is, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." And
100%. Yeah.
and it's so, it is, you just never know who you come across in life, specifically with this audience, veterinary colleagues, that we just have no idea what they're going through, right? And anything
Mm-hmm.
from like honking at somebody at a stop sign to to how colleagues are treated and how they treat each other,
Yeah.
and how they're treated from clients and staff, and again with each other. It just,
Mm-hmm.
be kind, and just
Yeah.
presume or hope that everybody's really doing the best that they can, right?
Yeah. Can we
And
assume good intent? Can we make the
exactly.
I like the make the charitable assumption, is that
Hmm.
if someone does this, is there a way that we can frame that isn't that
Right.
person is evil, or that person is weak, or that person is something else, which is challenging for us, in this
Hmm.
environment. And I do want to say I did talk about some very heavy stuff, and we needed
Hmm.
to talk about that.
Hmm.
But because I'm here, we always say, so we say in 12-step recovery when we share a story, the beautiful thing is the story has a happy ending because I'm
Right.
up here telling this story. And
Right.
so that's the other thing, is that I was given, so, so 2008, August 11th
Hmm.
of 2008. So my colleagues, and so let me say this, because this is
Okay.
also, my colleagues recognized what was going on with me.
Mm.
One of my, oh, and I always get goosebumps when I tell this. So, one, they wanted the best for me. One thing is
Hmm.
that if it wasn't for our head technician, Alex Soto, and I always like to talk about her, is that she's one of the main reasons why I'm still here. Veterinary professionals are the reason why I'm still here. Second is, one of the veterinarians that I worked with me when I was a student at Millhopper Veterinary Medical Center in Gainesville, and she was
Hmm.
the former president or chair of the Florida Board of Veterinary Medicine. Why is that important? Because she knew the resources that were available
Hmm.
to get me the help that I needed. Because it's
Hmm.
just like any other disease, is that get like to protect, to allow me to continue to be a veterinarian, but I was able to go to
Hmm.
treatment.
Hmm.
So they were able to get me into treatment, and so I was in treatment for 3 months, so for 90 days, and in that is where I had the awakening. Is where I was
Hmm.
given tools where I didn't know. I thought it was either I go on to the bitter end,
Hmm.
or I can't keep going on again, head in hand. I can't do this for another 25 years. I didn't know that there was a door number three, because I was scared. And part of that was, Jordan, is because I was scared to talk about it, because there's such a stigma around
Right.
alcohol and substance use disorder. Again, 12 to 15% of our colleagues at some point are going to meet criteria for this. We feel like we can't ask for help because we feel like we're going to be punished instead of
Hmm.
being helped. And it's like,
Hmm.
can we look upon this? I mean, stigma in mental and veterinary medicine is certainly decreasing, but this is one area where there's still a huge amount of stigma and a huge amount of misunderstanding and misinterpretation. And so when I went to treatment, I got into 12-step recovery. I learned a lot of the skills of resiliency, and they helped save my life. And they
Yeah.
also allowed me, the biggest thing, Jordan, they allowed me to love veterinary medicine again, is that I saw the part that I was playing and how I was perceiving things. And I was given tools to reframe that, say, hey, maybe that's, maybe that's not true. And that
Right.
understanding the power of those thoughts is that when I roll with that, my brain can't tell the difference whether that's real or not. And I'm gonna experience those emotions as though they're real, and that's gonna affect the people around me as well. And so it was just, I learned a lot of, powerful evidence-based tools, which then led to part of the question was, how did I get into the well-being space? In the
Right.
first
Well, how do
place.
we
So
were going to get into
yeah,
how did you get into the well-being? And so I
yeah,
think that you were, so August 11th, 2008
2008.
is when,
Yep,
is
it's
when
my
you,
sobriety. That's when I went into treatment. Yep, it
okay.
was a
And
Monday.
it's amazing how things happen in our
Yeah,
life and we just remember exactly.
yeah.
Right. Um, so what is your current job in veterinary medicine today?
Wow. So my current job is that I'm the chief medical and well-being officer for a group in Michigan called Veterinary United. So I get to help coach and advocate for our doctors and technicians. Also,
Mm-hmm.
doing some of the the nuts and bolts stuff of initiatives and policies and anesthesia protocols and monitoring equipment and that type of thing. But the other thing that I get to do is that, we just rewrote our whole alcohol and substance misuse policy,
Mm,
with evidence-based language. When the language is very strong, what that says to me when I come in is that if I do any of these things, I'm fired.
right.
And that there's no, that I know this is, and I can't ask for help, because if I ask for help, I'm going to lose my job. And the same thing, so to go along with this, the same thing is true on medical licensing applications. The AMA, the American Medical Association, and the Mayo Clinic found out in 2017 that states that had language around mental illness and alcohol and substance use, those physicians were 40% less likely to seek mental health treatment solely because of what was on the licensing application, that was a factor. So we know that because it puts out, when we talk about psychological
Right.
safety and how safe do I feel, I know what that means on that licensing application. I know
Mm-hmm.
that those questions mean that if I do those things, I don't get to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So we stay quiet and we suffer
Yeah.
until we can't, until we no longer can handle it anymore. And then that's why these things, how could it get to that point? Because there was no door number. I didn't think there was a door number 3. At no
Right.
point did I consider asking for help, which is scary and horrible. And like, how could
Right.
we, in this caring profession, that we hold these things in out of fear of repercussions for a mental illness? Yeah.
So I
So
think that's, you've brought up a couple different things. And one,
yeah.
I am such a big believer in clear communication. And those
Hmm.
that know me hear me say this all the time. I think it has, miscommunication, even the smallest amounts can do everything from in relationships to
Absolutely.
start wars, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's huge. And
Absolutely.
just, you talked about shifting the question from not what's wrong with you to what's happened with you, right? Those are
Yes.
2 to 3 words difference,
Fundamental.
right?
Yep.
Right. And it's a huge fundamental difference. And to your point now about the language, right, in reporting and being able to ask for help versus the language making it seem, okay, no matter what, I'm getting fired, right?
Right.
Again, that's minimal amounts of communication messaging, which when shifted have huge impacts. You said 40%, right? That's a huge
Hmm.
number, right?
Huge number.
And
Yep.
it's so important when we think about how we communicate verbally, virtually, digitally, especially in this
Hmm.
age, to understand the weight of our words, the weight of the messaging, the
Yeah.
weight of the communication that we are getting across, and
Yeah.
the potential impact that it has, positive and negative, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now you're in this space, this
Right.
space that you're
So
in, and
right. So and then to back, because the initial was how in the hell did I get? How did a
well, it really was
veterinarian?
your journey, right? Like, what was your journey to
Right. Right.
veterinary
Right.
medicine,
So
which has
yeah.
been part of this? Yeah.
Yeah. So what had happened, so I was in, so I'm in recovery, I'm going to 12-step meetings. I'm doing these things. My life is just, I, we say this term in recovery and it seems trite or just over the top, even though, is living a life beyond our wildest dreams. And what I would
Mm-hmm.
say is that I was given the tools to be things that before I got into recovery, I didn't think I could be. I did not think I could be a good partner. And here I
Mm-hmm.
was, a husband, and I was scared. I was scared to death that my fiance at the time, she's my wife now, we've been together for, quite a long time, so 16 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I was scared she was going to get pregnant. And the reason why is because I knew that I couldn't stop drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, how I'm going to be my father. And I knew and by then I knew I was going down that road.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to do those things and I was able to try to make decisions where I'm a human being and I can react, but I was given tools though that I could look when someone was reacting that way to me. Is that that's well, we can't see it, but I've got a sign in my office. It's the old, if you watch Ted Lasso, he quoted Walt Whitman, which is be curious, not judgmental.
I can see that
Is
over
that
your
can I
shoulder.
ask?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask what's going? The same like we just said is what's happened with you. Why?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on that is creating this threat mode in you? But so I was in recovery for 10 years, and then I realized that no one. I don't want to say no one because that's not true, but
Mm-hmm.
that there was a need for a discussion around alcohol and substance use disorder on top of the issues with suicide and mental illness. Is that
Mm-hmm.
it's all part of it. And I told my
Mm-hmm.
wife maybe 6 7 years ago, I said I'm gonna have to break, and in recovery we try to stay anonymous, with our recovery, which there are pros and cons to that. I would say one of the
Right.
cons is
Right.
is that the media will see the bad things, but we don't see the people getting better, and
Mm-hmm.
helping other people and building and recovering. And so I said, well, I said, I can't, I feel like I need to be part of this moving forward for the profession.
Yeah.
And so I was always active in the FVMA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just said, I was like, hey, they had a call for action for the chair of the outreach committee, which was basically the veterinarian who goes around and talks to other veterinarians who are having a use disorder. I'm like, that sounds like that's right up my alley. And so I did that for about 6 months. Then I said, do we have a well-being committee? And they were like, no, but we'd love for you to chair it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, again, red dot folks, like that's all you got to say. And so it's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then the imposter syndrome kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a veterinarian who went to AA or went to 12-step recovery meetings. While I knew all those things worked,
Right.
what am I? So, and that really hit me when I gave my first presentation to the FVMA's executive board. So the dean of the vet school, all
Mm-hmm.
the president of the FVMA, all so Dr. RC was back, Dr. Jose RC was the president of the AVMA, but the so two of the this is back a number of years ago, AVMA candidates for president. The
Mm-hmm.
current AVMA president, Dr. Jean, was there. Like, and I'm like, and I have to get up and present, and I'm like, and that's when it was like, I'm just this, and having the negative self talk and all that. So I
Right.
ended up though going down the road of, hey, well, let me lean into, like, I love learning stuff. So I started getting, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do a master's because of how much I was working, but I ended up taking these really robust like certifications and things because I knew that I didn't necessarily want to do the research, which is why I became a
Mm-hmm.
veterinarian. Like I knew I was going to be the person in the lab, but I was going to be able to go out and try to help my colleagues. So that started this thing, and I jokingly tell my wife, like, I do certifications like I used to drink. So I just learn
Right.
as much as I can, and so I have been able to, and then been able to work with some of the biggest and brightest and best people not only in the US but in the world working in workplace well-being, and resiliency and these types of things.
Hmm.
And so I'm just really grateful to be able to be part of that movement in veterinary medicine.
Well, and I think that there's huge value irrelevant to what the exact degree is, and without devaluing those, there's huge value in your firsthand experience.
Mm. I agree. Is that it's a and, it's a combination. It's multi. I forget in human medicine what the not continuum of care, but there are different roles that are important in the healing of someone. And
Hmm.
so, like
Hmm.
my role is not to sit down. Well, I can be an advocate to discuss childhood trauma. I'm not a mental health professional. Like
Hmm.
I'm not going to sit down and work through those things on a clinical level with someone.
Right, right.
However, what I do have is, as an educated, peer, I don't want to say specialist, but like someone who is a peer that I know what it's like to walk through that, and also know that what my path was isn't necessarily what your path is going to be, but that
Hmm.
I can direct to some of the to the other resources. But that also where that comes in is how does it work, not so much on a one-on-one healing perspective,
Hmm.
but how do we change the workplace? Like that's
Right.
the next level, is that we're very focused too on the individual, and which is very important, which is part of it. But we do have to work on individual resilience and well-being. We have to work on that on a team level. We absolutely have to say, what are we doing as organizations?
Hmm.
National organizations, workplaces. What are we doing to facilitate workplaces that improve, not that we just don't leave sicker than we came in, but how do we
Hmm.
create a workplace where we leave and we're in a better psychological condition than we arrived in. That's the
Right.
goal. That's the
Right. And
goal.
that's
Yeah.
and that's definitely not what you hear on a regular basis currently.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I think there's huge value in the combination of a mental health professional and also colleagues that can provide that peer support, because
Mm-hmm.
um, it allows you to feel really heard with your individual situation from a veterinary professional perspective, which
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the mental health specialists are really, or professionals are really able to help you with areas that are vitally important,
Mm-hmm.
as well. With that additional support from the peer support
Yeah.
is also vitally important along with
Yeah.
that, right? That
Yeah.
sort of tag team approach can be so
Yeah.
helpful. And it, the VIN Foundation's Vets for Vets group, and program, we I just hear from so many colleagues that just having somebody that they can talk to
Mm-hmm.
that understands the day in and
Yeah.
day out pressures specifically of the veterinary profession, along with, mental health professional help outside,
Yeah.
but that really offers a lot of value to sort of have that safe space of community where
Yeah.
you can share and talk and be safe.
Absolutely. And that was my experience in recovery, is
Mm-hmm.
that it was vital to have to have mental health professionals, to have medical professionals as well,
Right.
but that to also have that group, that
Mm-hmm.
social network, that place to feel
Right.
safe where I could connect, and that people weren't, and that's the wonderful thing about a real strong recovery group, is not going to say, here, you need to do this or you need to do that. Like, it's going to
Right.
say, I did I understand where you're at, and that this is, and that we recommend like bringing all these things in together holistically, to
Mm-hmm.
get better. And so that's what I love seeing, is that integrative, approach.
Right.
And again, that's where just seeing it in 12-step recovery, and then seeing it in the veterinary community, is having us as, I mean, we're all caring individuals, but it's
Right.
like, we caring isn't always enough, and we do need, and we have to have experts in treatment. But like you said, is that sometimes we need to have people who understand what it's like, when you drop a pedicle and a dog bleeds and you question whether you're doing the right thing, or a medical mistake
Yeah.
happens, and
Right.
or whatever the situation is that we walk through that, and we can be there shoulder to shoulder next to somebody as they're walking through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and I think there's huge value in that. And I really appreciate you being again willing to share your story, and I think the more that people are that trick of wanting to be confidential and at the same time there is huge value in people sharing stories because that's the only way that
Hmm.
others can know they're not alone, right?
Right. And again, the
If
numbers tell us 12 to
mhm
15%, like knowing,
mhm right
knowing all the people that I know, in recovery. And that was a huge thing for me when I first got into recovery. I
mhm
found out all these like professors,
right
like people and all these people that I had no idea. I mean, my first sponsor was a veterinary internist. Like I had
mhm
no,
you had no
and
clue.
I didn't go, I
Yeah,
didn't necessarily, I didn't pick, I mean, I
yeah,
didn't go out trying to find him, but
right.
there he, and it was just
Mhm
like, but that connection to have those two things, the veterinary medicine part and the recovery part together,
mhm
and to not feel shame, to
mhm
not feel gut level being judged.
mhm
That was really, really important. And so that too is why we say our Sunday night vets in recovery meeting, that we have for the Vets for Vets program is so powerful because it's a space where, we can all share, and it's more about the things. It's about, we
mhm
talk about the same things, I think, that most veterinarians do, but we have a set of tools and we have a set of support, and when we say, to our, hey, have you taught, have you talked to this person? Have you talked to your therapist? Have you done, these
mhm
things, where we want everybody to get better together, and it's just such a wonderfully supportive group.
so I think
So
we should probably tell our
little
audience.
pitch to that.
Yeah, we should
Yes.
probably tell our audience that Rich
Yeah.
does help run the VIN Foundation Vets for Vets Vets in Recovery group. There is a Vets in Recovery group as well as a new group that we just created based out of colleagues' request, which is Veterinary Professionals in Recovery. They're
Hmm.
confidential. We'll put links in the episode notes. Um, and so that's the group that Phil's referring to.
Hmm.
And I also want to, for a moment, go back to when you were talking about how when you first started drinking, what you realize is that it almost unscrewed that part of you where you were
Yeah.
concerned about not belonging and that you didn't
Yeah.
fit in. Because I think,
Right.
Brene Brown wrote a book about belonging and
Oh
she
yeah.
speaks about it in
Yeah.
many of her books. But just at the core of all of who we are, it's this feeling of wanting to belong, right?
Wanting to belong,
And
feeling like we matter. Yep. Those two
exactly.
two things so powerful. Yeah.
So powerful. And that combined with individual ACE scores and childhood trauma. I
Hmm.
mean, those could be multiple podcast episodes in and of themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and all those things play such a role. And when you talk about how alcohol was your coping mechanism because you didn't know others, right? And as a
Yeah.
child and as you grow up, all of us are trying to figure things out and we come to it with the tools that we have, right?
Yeah.
And what other way can we learn those except finding them along our path in one way or another, right?
Right.
And I think that's just so important. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that because I think that's so vitally important because we all have our own coping mechanisms that are
Yeah.
positive and negative, right? And hopefully we're continuing to learn how to improve those, right? And how
Yeah.
to become better people and getting to know ourselves more and more. And a lot of that means looking at what was our childhood like, right? What were the tools
Yeah.
I was taught? Are those tools serving me? Um,
Yeah.
and so that's vitally important. I just want to take a moment to recognize that. Um, okay, so what are the tools that are around now for colleagues that you think are really helpful?
Yeah. So what I would say, there are a number of groups that have come up. Like obviously there's there's the Vets for Vets groups, that there are multiple different groups that have online meetings and an online presence.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Veterinary Hope Foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
they're facilitated groups of veterinarians. And I think that's where a lot of the power is hearing stories and say, oh, I know you felt like that, like I felt like that, and
Right.
that it validates these, and that I'm not, that I'm open sharing without the sense of, am I going to be judged for this, or am I going to be
Right.
this? And then it's put in a way, in recovery, we have, when we're in these recovery meetings, most of us have a basis of some of these tools to reframe, and look at things from a different angle. And the more I, over the past, 6, 7 years, it's very similar to cognitive behavioral coaching, as this reframing process that we learn in recovery. And it's a very
Right.
powerful tool, but to use that in there. And so it's different than some of very different from some of the things that we see in social media, where it's co-rumination, where it's just unloading, and it's and it's this, it's just a negative, a negative energy space that creates this emotional contagion, that gives us this release to blame. And so, not to say that there aren't things that we have to look at, but also saying is that, one of the biggest things that I learned in recovery is, what part did I play? What part
Right.
am I playing in this? And so what I would say is this too, is that I can take that ACEs test and it helps me explain a lot. However, if I don't do the things, if I'm not talking to my therapist, if I'm not doing some of the work to try to heal that, then I'm not doing that. Awareness is the first step, but
Yep.
I have to be able to go, am I willing to do the work? Like, am I willing to do what I need to do to get better? And so for me, like, I literally had to get to the point where I didn't have another direction. Like,
Right.
I didn't have any fight left in me, and it was like, okay, yeah, like, I'll, begrudgingly, even though I'm at this point in my life, begrudgingly, I will do these things. And they changed my life. And so it's
Wow.
like, can we, can we lift lift the bar a little bit, so that we're not having to be bludgeoned, with some of these negative self-talk, and like some of the things that we do, and can we lean into these tools of self-compassion? Can we lean into these tools of reframing? Can we lean into empathy? Can we lean into some of these things? And
Right.
that's where, what I also say too is that then allows us to increase our love for veterinary medicine. Is that when I'm able to be curious, not judgmental, and it's challenging sometimes, but when I'm able to do
Yeah.
that with a client, it changes the whole dynamic. And instead of me walking out of that exam room and going, "Oh, Mrs. Jones, what a PO," and then spreading that to everyone, I've given her some space to understand there's something going on with her. I'm not saying what's wrong with you, what happened to you, and we're able to process through some of those things. She's able to see that she might have misjudged something that I said, or what have you. We work through it, and then I go out, and then she's in a different space where she felt heard. She feels like she matters. The
Right.
pet gets the treatment that it needs. I go out and get to share that as a win, with my team, and it's a fundamentally different effect on the culture of that practice. It's a fundamentally
Right.
different
Yep.
effect than if I came out and I just reacted, which is our normal response. The negativity bias, the threat, all of that, and I can take a pause and try to reframe that. It's a very powerful thing. And so those are all the things that I hope and I wish and I
Right.
want for our profession, because this is a beautiful profession. Like, it really,
Yeah.
it can be the things that we imagine it was when we were kids, to a degree, but the opportunity to be of service, and the opportunity to give back, and a lot of these opportunities are afforded in a way that's not in any other profession. And we all have, I mean, if we were sitting here talking about accounting, I'm sure there are things that we could bitch about, and but it's that, like, everything's got its stuff. I mean, yes, veterinary medicine has its challenges. We have things, but if we're only looking at the negative, and we're not looking at the things that veterinary medicine offers us, we're doing it an injustice, a true
Mm-hmm.
injustice to not, if we're, and if we are evidence-based clinicians, if we are evidence-based, if we are to go through our day and genuinely look at all the good things that happened
Mm-hmm.
versus the quote unquote bad things that happened, if we tally that up, I know because we did it, at
Mm-hmm.
our old hospital, you're going to
Right.
get a 10-to-1 ratio of clients that said thank you, clients that were
Mm-hmm.
like thank you so much, or hey, I'm very glad this happened, or I did this thing that was really cool. And what happens is attention, where we choose to put our attention is what grows. And so
Right.
when we do have that negativity bias, and I'm squirreling a little bit, but that it serves us, is that negativity
Yeah.
bias kept us alive. It's an evolutionary adaptation. If I'm back, trying to hunt for woolly mammoth and I'm not looking for the saber-toothed tiger, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
However, the ones that were always, head on a swivel, like freaking out, looking for, guess whose genes we inherited?
Right.
Like, thanks a lot, Charles Darwin. But the thing is that we have to know that some of those things, they don't serve us as well. And you mentioned that,
Right.
like, does this thought serve me? And,
Mm-hmm.
that's a powerful question to ask. And so again, it's the world is the world. And, and I used to think too, like, if we talk about, not to go into, politics and the news and those types of things, but if I look at those things, like, is it going to change what I'm going to do when I walk into the vet hospital? And I'm not saying that we put our head in the sand, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying that if there are positive things that I know that I can do to affect change, I'm going to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
But that if I'm sitting and if I'm worrying and I'm doing these things, I'm not able to, then I'm of no use to anybody. Then I just go down
Mm-hmm.
the rabbit hole.
The
So
rabbit hole.
got a
Right.
little, got a little, got a little soapboxy
No, I think
there,
I
but
think the
yeah,
soapboxy though is perfect because clearly there's way more than one episode here. And so I think that
yeah,
we're definitely going to be having you back for additional episodes on this podcast.
yeah.
And we're getting kind of close to, we like to try to keep these under an
Oh, okay.
hour because just for
Yeah,
people's attention span. Um,
yeah,
but I just have a couple other questions. And one is there's
sure.
so much here and I really want to dive deeper. And I think we could have a whole other discussion about workplace safety, and
Hmm.
not safety like physical safety, but
No,
like
but
emotional, mental safety,
so
right?
what we let, well, I haven't come up with a lot of things on my own, but maybe somebody has probably said this, but I think of like OSHA for our brains. Is that
Mm-hmm.
we
Yep.
wear, I'm grateful to be with a group that's working on some psychological health and safety standards, like some
Mm-hmm.
amazing people working on
Mm-hmm.
psychological health and safety standards for veterinary practices in the US. But we wear lead shields. We wear lead when we take radiographs to protect us from ionizing radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't, when we have an angry client or when we have things that we know going in are going to increase our risk of psychological harm, when we talk about conflict, when we talk about that lack of mattering, when we talk about these things, when we talk about not getting reward and recognition, when we talk about trying to see 50 patients in a day, like these external things that get put on us,
Mm-hmm.
why can we not be, we need to be proactive, knowing that those things are going to have a detrimental effect on our brains. Just like if I walk in and take x-rays and I don't have lead
Right.
on, that's going to build up over time and it's going to cause a problem. And the same damn thing is true for we call them psychosocial factors or psychosocial hazards that happen in
Mm-hmm.
veterinary hospitals. And so how do we proactively create a system or a hospital or a workplace that proactively prevents those, and not only prevents harm, but again, promotes flourishing? How do we
Right.
make a place where, let me say that one of the best compliments I ever got as a leader is the hospital that I used to work at. The team would say, "We come here to get away from the world." Like the team said, and we meant it. Like
Yeah.
we came to
Yeah.
work, and the work was our oasis. Like what a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. I mean, I love. I mean, just
Right.
loved. Missed the, if they're listening, God bless them. I love them so. I mean, we still get to talk and everything, and they're just wonderful, wonderful, beautiful human beings. But that was true. Like, I mean, we laughed and we had Nerf
Mm-hmm.
gun fights, and we just. but we did a great job. You know, it was very much like
Right.
Scrubs, the show Scrubs. I mean, you know, it's like I
Same,
always
same.
wanted it to be like that. Yeah, yeah. But those are the things: is how can we both protect
Mm-hmm.
our professionals from psychological injury, but
Mm-hmm.
also promote an environment that makes us want to come to work. And that can
Mm-hmm.
be done. That absolutely can be done. We just have to be intentional about it. And we have to, you know, we have to be foundationally and measure these things. We have to measure what's going on with our people, because otherwise it's just us being, you know, veterinary professionals walking into a room and looking over and go, oh, well, yeah, I probably got liver disease. So we're gonna no, we run
Right.
tests. You know, we run
Mm-hmm.
diagnose. You know, we're measuring these things. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things too. Like, are we doing that on a regular basis? So anyhow, another
Well, so
episode.
that, I mean, that's a trailer. That's a trailer for our next episode, pretty much.
Right, right.
Well, and the hope being is that the things that you do in the workplace would then, like when you say that your colleagues would come there and it would be like the oasis away from everything else, hopefully what's also happening is that the benefits of what's happening in work is impacting the other areas of
Happens
their
up
life.
100%, 100%.
Yep.
And so that
Yep.
was one of the wonderful things too, is like they would come in and go, you know, or I remember one of my technicians, she would say, she'd be like, Dr. Richmond, we did, you know, my husband said this thing, and she's like, and I thought about it, and I was like, maybe I'm not, you know, and
There
she's
you
like, well,
go.
and it was just, and you're right, like that's it. It has this, you know, Sean Aker talks about that ripple effect, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that happens. It's like it starts here, but those ripples, and then even something like the butterfly flapping its wings, is that
Right.
those team members leave that hospital, they go to, you know, we have Publix down here in Florida, you know, they go to Publix and they smile at the cashier, you know,
Mm-hmm.
who's, because they're in a good mood, and it's, and
Right.
again, that emotional contagion. The negative
Yep.
stuff spreads like wildfire, but damn it, the positive stuff does too. And so we can
Absolutely.
have, you know, we can have that positive impact just because we created a wonderful veterinary workplace. It
Mm-hmm.
spreads out, and then it's, and whoa, and then I start getting goosebumps again. Like that's the, you know,
That's, yeah.
can we create that environment too? So I can tell, because I'm getting, I start
That's our
talking
next
faster
episode.
and
That
leaning
we're
in.
gonna.
Yeah, right, right.
That'll
That's what I get
definitely be our
excited
next
about.
episode.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah,
one
yeah.
last questions for you, which I
Yes,
kind of like
yes,
to ask
Jordan.
our guests, which are, do you have a secret talent or something you enjoy doing that others might not know about?
So, yeah, you know, I have to say yes. So this is, I
We get the most
recently,
random answers, so I can't wait
yeah.
to hear
So,
this.
so this is something. So I was a jock like in high school, and like did competitive powerlifting and all this, and that sadly kept me away from playing Dungeons and Dragons like in high school and
D
all of
and
that.
D.
Like I just,
There you go.
and I just started playing it like 6 months ago, and it's so, and I know these people, and I don't. It's not even like, but I play with like some of the, like the, you know, the vet famous, you know, peeps. Like
Oh,
it's just
there's
funny, and
vet
we're all in
famous
there.
D and D people.
Oh ho, totes. Yeah, it's like it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, and it's just beautiful and wonderful, and it's like, and
Right,
it's meditative, and like we're in this thing, and it's just that we get, oh, it's just it's
but
fantastic, and
that's
I'm like,
another point of connection.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
but it's on a different level, and it's just, and again, it's just beautiful, and it's a way for us to connect and then be there. And then again, is we have to lean into the positive stuff, and it's not all about, oh, just be positive. If we're trying to be happy all the time, that's pathologic. However, we
Mm-hmm.
can we do need to lean into and try to be intentional about inducing positive emotions, because
Mm-hmm.
they can act like a suit of armor for us when some of the things other things
Yeah.
happen. You know, and those, the hormones that are released and the experience that we have, it's not just, oh, just feel good vibes. It's really, you know, and we were intent, and the reason why I say that too is at our hospital we were very intentional about that.
Yeah.
You know, like if you saw it, we had a loose phone rule, you know, and so if you saw a funny meme, the rule, I mean, as long as there wasn't like a hit by car or something, you had to go
Right.
around and show everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
what was interesting, and I'll say this, is one of the hospitals that I used to work at, you weren't allowed to laugh, because the person was, well, the owners, the people in the rooms are going to think you're laughing at them. Different where we were is that we would laugh, we would bring that energy appropriately,
Right, right, of
not if
course.
they're, but
Right.
bringing that energy in,
Mm-hmm.
if the environment was attuned to it, and people love that, and they could feel that, and they were more comfortable, because what does positive emotion do? It releases oxytocin. What is oxytocin? It's the
Right,
trust hormone. What do we
right.
need in a clinical relationship? I need you to be able to trust that I'm going to give you the right answer, and that I'm not putting you in threat mode, or that I
Mm-hmm.
recognize what's going on with you and I communicate that to you. And that
Right.
is where, I mean, it's cool, the science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to say, this is why we laugh at work. It's all
Right.
right. Yeah.
Right.
So, okay. Sorry, squirreled again.
No, I love this, and this again. We're definitely not. We're doing way more episodes. This is not.
Yeah.
You're just trailing them out. So, Phil, thank you so much for your time
Oh,
and your
Jordan, and
vulnerability and
thank
your
you for all the
braveness.
work with Vets for Vets, the VIN Foundation. Very grateful, and then the Vets in Recovery group is genuinely, it's a foundation of my, me being able to be happy today, and I'm just very grateful that it's there. And we all say that it's our favorite meeting. And so
Aw.
I know a group of 30 to 40 veterinarians who are intensely grateful for the space that you and your group have created for us.
Well, the goal is really here to help, and what we say at Vets for Vets is you are not alone, and that's really where it
Yeah,
all begins,
100%.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So thank you so much, Phil, for your time and for everything that you do and for
Thank you.
being a spokesperson for this courage and vulnerability so that others feel that they can be seen and heard and know that they're not alone. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Veterinary Pulse. Please check the episode notes for additional information referenced in the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow, subscribe, and share a review. We welcome feedback and hope you will tune in again. You can find out more about the VIN Foundation through our website, vinfoundation.org, and our social media channels. Thank you for being here. Be well.